Cool.
Cool, buddy. Anytime.
All right, you getting there, Kiko? He's giving us a
We're
thumbs
good
up.
to go.
Sweet. All right, welcome to the Dapper Gaffer YouTube channel. And today we're piping in Mr. John Roche. Is that saying Roche right? Is it
You
Roche?
did. Well, it's funny because my mother pronounces it just like you did.
Yeah,
but
okay.
My dad used to say Roche.
Roche?
Yeah.
What's your preference?
How you said it is perfect.
Perfect, Roche. Okay, so we've been loosely connected online for a while, and then we got to meet in person for the first time at NAB just
We did.
last week or the week before, whatever that was. So great to meet you.
And you were 100% dapper. I want to point that out to anybody that wasn't there.
Thank you. I dappered a little down for this.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks. So John is a New York City gaffer as well as the founder of the Gaffer Salon. Do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about what brought that about, the Gaffer Salon?
Yeah,
idea?
if I'm 100% honest, I've been doing this a long time. Over the years, I think everyone I talk to goes through this. You kind of get depressed, and I don't know, you're kind of going through the motions. You can get in this rut, and then there's this period of reinvention, right? There's sort of like you take a step back, and you're like, all right, what do I need to be doing that I'm not doing? You kind of go through these. I mean, I think a lot of people did that during the pandemic, and so it was during the pandemic that I thought, you know what, I'm just phoning it in. I got to up my game. I got to get back in the creative juices flowing. And so I had been on Cinematography Salon that David Krupa started, and I was frustrated there weren't a lot of conversations about lighting. They were few and far between. And I just woke up one morning and thought, why don't I just start Gaffer Salon? With just the intent of hooking up with a couple dozen gaffers and we could talk shop.
Logical.
And then, it took a while, but, people started coming in, and what was really great was I started getting manufacturers coming in. People like, Mitch Gross from ProLight or Dan from Aperture. They just started coming in. And now we're up to about somewhere around 4,500 people. And I think we've almost got every country in the world covered. Not quite, but I think we're very close.
Wow.
When I started out, you could barely find information. Like you'd try to get a book or a pamphlet. I mean, now it's incredible that these kind of communities exist.
Yeah, and I do love the lighting rep component, or manufacturers being represented there as well, being able to hear stuff directly from the horse's mouth.
It's been good for them. Originally I wasn't sure, did we really want the lighting reps in there? Do we,
Sure.
do we want to talk shit? But I think they realized what a resource it was for them, and we realized what a resource it was for us. And the fact that you can have a vendor list and you have a question about a sumo light or an airy light or whatever, you could tag somebody and, get a product or a support question answered or whatever. And so that's really proven to be, I know people that told me, dude, we were on set and some light went down, or we had some issue, DMX thing going on, we couldn't figure it out. And if a manufacturer didn't get back right away, somebody else had a solution. And so things were being solved in, almost kind of real time. And so that's been,
which is a big deal.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been great.
So what did you come away with from NAB? What were some of the top things that you noted out there?
Well, I was a little, Nanlux had approached me last year about maybe bringing me out to NAB to do something. I said to them, look, as running Gaffer Salon as an independent gaffer, I'm not like a brand ambassador. So I just wanted to be clear with them up front that I was coming as John Roche, New York City gaffer, or John Roche, founder of Gaffer Salon, but I wasn't, So once I cleared that up, and they were like, no, that's what we want you here for. So that said, I did spend more time at the Nanlux booth. And to be perfectly frank, I own quite a bit of both. I think I own every light that Nanlux makes.
Wow.
I've been very happy. I own a little bit of the Nanlite stuff. Obviously, that's kind of the more value brand prosumer stuff. So I'll start with Nanlux first. I was really impressed with the Pavo Slim. They sent me one. Actually, they sent me three. And
different sizes, or?
Well, they sent me two of the 2x1s because Andrew had just done a review, and it's, as I said in the review, I don't ever want to follow Andrew with my review because he covers everything.
Yeah.
And so it's tricky. And he's such a straightforward guy, and he lays it out in such a great way, pros and cons. He's always fair. And he said to me early on, don't review anything you don't like. Just put it off the table. If somebody sends you something and there's a problem with it, just let them know. Don't review it. And so when I got the Pavos, they sent me 2 of the 120s because they had a backplate where you could mount them together
Okay,
and
yeah, that
get a
makes
4x1.
sense. Yeah.
But since that happened, they've now announced an additional 4x1, a 2 by half a foot panel, and a folding 2x2 panel.
I think it was Andrew who was suggesting they come out with a 4x1.
Yeah, Andrew, and that was one of the reasons, because Andrew said like, oh, I'll buy 4 of these right away. And then a lot of people in the comments are like, me too. And so I think, Nanlite kind of woke up to like, okay, there's a market for an expansion of this line.
Sure.
And I think what happened with that light was, Nanlite decided to put CRMX into these, which is kind of a bit of unusual. We're seeing it a little bit more now in value brands that are adding CRMX.
Yeah.
So at the price point, it's like, it's a really good value. The quality of these lights, I think I wouldn't say they're exceptional. I think they're really good.
Really good bang for the buck, yeah.
Really good bang for the buck. Nice.
And they just added Lumen Radio to the Pavo tubes as well. I don't know if you saw that. The XR.
The Pavos I haven't played with just because I already have such an inventory of Astera products.
Titans,
so
yeah.
I was already too deep into Astera to consider the Pavo. They look great. They sent me a couple of the early ones before they added CRMX, and those were decent. But I really needed to have, they needed to integrate into my wireless, system. They're trying to bridge that gap between the pro market, or maybe you could say the lower end of the pro market, and the higher end of the content creators, right? Give these additional feature set. And the other thing that really caught my eye was because I've been begging and pleading for a 50-degree lens for their 6DC. Like most manufacturers, they only have a 19 and a 36, and I was pleading for a 50. I really wanted a 10, but I thought I wasn't going to get to 10 until I got to 50. And a lot of manufacturers were steering clear of the 50, I think, because it's not so optically efficient, and they were worried the output wasn't going to be there. But I don't know if you're like me, but in New York, I'm in tight environments.
Yeah, you need it sometimes. Yeah,
I need the spread, and I look around the room with these 60Cs, and half the time I'm at 10%. I'm sometimes having to put ND on at 1% because it's too bright. Yeah. So they had a 10-degree lens, which is, if you like CRLS or you like,
I did see that the 10-degree on that little light that threw pretty far.
It's a little big, but not. I mean, it's big relative to the 60C, but. And I haven't tried it. I don't know the photometrics, but it looked really promising, and I'm really excited to get like 3 or 4 of those because if I had a 50, then it would almost be the perfect light.
Sure.
The only, like when people ask me about that, the only deal breaker for some people is it's not really a cueable light. Like if you really have an in-shot cue where you have to fade, it's a little too steppy.
Yeah.
But the next closest light that enables that capability is probably the Filex G3. And that's 3 times the price.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So
what about these?
Nanlux,
yeah. Go
ahead. You go. I'm talking.
I was going to jump into what I'm referring to as the 4K killers, the 2400, 2600 kind of range.
Yeah. I
super
thought,
lights.
Andrew Locke and I were talking about this a year ago that he was very early and smart to sell his 4Ks, and I see people now putting their 4Ks up trying to get $7 or $8 grand for it, and I'm like, good luck.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt that way. I went through that with the M18s relative to the 1200s, which were close. And I think, and the 4K, so if you take the Nanlux 2400 or maybe even the new Aperture, XT20, the Electrostorm 26, which I have not tested or demoed. I only saw it at the show. I think the 4K is going to hero in full spot mode. It's probably going to be about twice the output in full spot. But in every other respect, it can't compete. I mean, it's not dimmable, it's not color tunable, it's not wirelessly, all that stuff. So for me, I bought 2 2400 buys, and I like the Aperture, but it's too big a light for me. Like I have a small truck, and it's too friggin' big.
What size is your what truck kind of size?
I have like a 3-ton box, 14-foot box truck.
14-foot box, yeah.
And then I finally saw it, at NAB, and I'm like, and the ballast is really big. Like everything about it is big. Now it's big for a reason, and they have an explanation as to why they made certain decisions, why that ballast is, say, way bigger than the Nanlux 2400. And they're really trying to achieve this tremendous, great low-end dimming capability, amongst other things. And so they were really gearing that to like the top tier feature market. But the other thing too is, I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, I use 60 amp or 100 amp baits like once or twice a year now. So I'm not going to be able to hook up that light to distro. I'm going to have to run it off a 20 amp circuit. So with the, the aperture being 26, I'm never going to get up to 26. The Nanlux Evoke 24B, I can get to like somewhere between 90 and 95% depending on the, voltage.
I think the other company to be looking at is Godox, right?
Yeah, I think Godox made a significant mistake. I own some Godox product. I like some of their stuff, but in respect to the 2400, they did not put green and magenta correction in, which in 2024, I just think that genie's out of the bottle now. And you're competing against Nanlux, which has green and magenta correction. Aperture has green and magenta correction.
Yeah.
So
that was a similar thought. That was a concern for me. I mean, I have to tip my hat to the build quality looks incredible on those things. Like just picking up, it just seems, of the three, it seems like really good.
They are doing some really good stuff. And I've not had any of these personally on set because I already have the Nanlux or some of the Aperture stuff. But when I looked at them in the show and talking with Andrew and other, Luke and other folks, solid build quality.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that. And that was, I didn't have as much time to spend at Godox as I wanted to, but I looked, they had the 1200 new RGBWW unit.
Yep.
Didn't seem that much bigger than their, than the bicolor head. They didn't have them side by side, so I wasn't 100% sure, but it seemed like a reasonable size head for a 1200 full color light. So that seemed interesting to me. I also was very interested in their RGBWW mats because they had a 4x4 800 watt mat. Now I didn't dig in, I couldn't test it. I didn't have a meter with me. I own two. They sent me one to review, so I got one free unit. I did a review, and out of the box, that unit, and this goes back to what I was saying about Andrew, don't review the unit if you have issues, sure. Let him fix it, try to help get this unit better. And so they sent it to me, and I initially was like really impressed, and I started doing testing. And as I dimmed that unit down, the Kelvin was shifting. So if I was at 56 by 100 Kelvin, by the time I got down to 10% Kelvin, it had shifted to like 4,300.
Wow, that's significant.
And it was just a mess. And it was just, they didn't have the emitters balanced right. It just, so they sent me a new firmware, and that completely almost 95% corrected it.
It's crazy how much like they can really adapt a product just with firmware these days.
Yeah. Because it was just the emitters weren't balanced correctly as you dim down. So that for them, I guess, was a relatively easy fix.
But back to the that green magenta idea though. I think especially on the big fixtures, it's a big deal because the LED chips degrade over time, and that's going to be kind of your saving grace is to be able to. I guess I feel like I've seen a color shift, on older lights. Even like some Astras and stuff like that. Just a few years down the road, they don't seem like as spot on as they were.
Oh, that's interesting because I have two. Astras are really. I've sold a lot of stuff. I'm selling stuff more and more frequently. And partially because you can't get that much for them, but I have like two Astra 6Xs and two of the older 4X. And I put a meter to them, and they still seem pretty damn good.
Okay. Now,
I don't know if I didn't have TM30. I didn't have the fancy meter when I first got those. But those are, and that, we'll switch.
And completely usable. They're still completely usable. But I'm just thinking on those big high-powered lights where they're just, burning at the peak, at the edge of technology, having that green magenta shift is going to be kind of a game changer just to be able to give you some more life.
I need it. And that's, and I told Godox, and I even said it in my review, I'm like, Godox is in a weird place because, they started as a value brand manufacturer. They've started no lid line, which is meant to be their pro brand.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the 4x4, the obvious competitor would be a Lightmat 8 Light Gear. That's a $5,500 list price unit. Now, when I bought my 4x4, when Travis Weirs was doing his city kit,
Yep.
I got one for $1,350. And it's way brighter than a Lightmat 8.
Sure.
And when I tested it, it was better color. You know, so I'm saying to Godox, so why didn't, and the weird thing is they made the head IP rated, but not the ballast. They didn't give any like rain jacket. I'm like, why don't you just add green and magenta correction in? I'd be willing to sacrifice some output to have full green and magenta, make the whole thing IP rated, which is what Aperture did with the new Infinity mats, the ballast and right, and put built-in Ceramics. Then you're making a pro light. Right now, you're not making a pro light. You're close, but you're,
it's kind of half pro.
And so you charge me like I would have gladly paid $2,500 instead of $1,350 if it had all that stuff, and I would have still been less than half the price of a Lightmat 8. So Godox had some other stuff, like they've got that somewhat, you know, Godox is a little questionable because they do tend to knock things off, you know, or come very close. So I have a huge problem with their knockoff of the CRLS reflected lighting system, and a bit of a problem with their knockoff of Dato's PB70. One could argue that the beam projector, you know, like Film Gear makes mole beam-ish, like beam projectors. I don't know if there's, you know, I don't know that there's a patent involved. It's like, you know, we all make, like everybody can make a Fresnel. Everybody can make a open face light, whatever, cob light. So, but I do think they're doing, you know, there was some really interesting stuff from Godox.
That mole beam idea, I mean, that's obviously what they were replicating there. It did look pretty interesting. And I'm surprised that I haven't seen anyone else put something like that out yet, really.
Well, it's significant. In my head, before I saw it, I thought it was much smaller. Like I was expecting it to be somewhat smaller than the Dato PB70. But the PB70 is so much brighter and so much cleaner.
That's like, the HMI one? Is that
What's that?
Is that the HMI, like parabolic?
Why they didn't go bump up to an 1800 watt HMI bulb, I don't know. But the existing PB70 is a 1200 watt HMI. So it has all the problems that any HMI does. It's, you know, not dimmable, or it's slightly dimmable, but, you know, all the issues that you have with HMIs. However, it is a massive amount of output.
That's what I've heard from people who've used it. I've not had my hands on one.
But Godox's design, if you look at the design, it looks just like the PB70, even in the sort of industrial design of it.
Yeah.
But it is, the thing I was like, it's too massive, first off, for the amount of output you're getting, right? You're not getting, because it's a cob light, and we have this problem with these cob lights, whether it's in a projection or in that kind of thing, that they're just not as efficient as a point source bulb.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to bet that's
probably where the size is coming into play. Just it's bigger cob. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I've been talking a lot with Jacob Ballinger at the Light Bridge, because I think it was 2 years ago at Cinegear, Sumo was showing off a laser LED. Now, the color wasn't particularly good yet, but it was a very narrow collimated beam. And my thinking is, once that technology gets to the point where we can have decent color metrics out of it, that's going to be a game changer with anybody that likes to use CRLS.
Laser technology?
Laser LED technology. Okay. Because then you're going to have a super collimated beam that you could shoot. I could, you know, like have a small light, collimated beam, hit a 25 centimeter panel, and get this, you know, beautiful return. I mean, when we get to that point, because right now we have these, you know, enormous beam projectors. So to me, the solution to get those smaller is in this laser LED technology, which is still like, I'm really hopeful that a few years down the pike, we might maybe start to see some.
Have you seen that? Yeah, I saw at Filmscape, which is the Chicago kind of NAB type of thing. Last year some guy had this, it was, I believe, still a prototype, but it was a laser-based technology, kind of had a big, almost ballast sort of thing. But then it was piping a laser beam through like a fiber optic kind of system.
Oh, they showed that at Cinegear.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. It was interesting. I don't know that I would have use for it, but it seemed really interesting.
But it just did kind of open up some interesting questions of the possibilities of that type of technology. But the saturation they got out of it was
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, it made like the LEDs next to it look like pastels.
Yeah. Well, what interested you the most at NAB? Did you have like a clear standout for you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously bouncing around the lighting booths, mostly.
Yeah.
I did go over
Yeah.
check out Black Magic because they made a lot of noise
Yeah.
with their cameras and they had some new
Yeah.
panels and stuff. But I think Kino's doing some interesting stuff too. I don't know if you stopped by the Kino booth with their.
I did, because they wanted me to do a review on the Mimic, which I put out on the Gaffer Salon YouTube channel. But
Okay.
when they first asked me, I'm like, this is way out of my wheelhouse. Like, I don't know anything about volume work. But I reached out to a friend of mine who does a lot of volume work, and we decided to have Kino send 4 units there. And I was kind of blown away coming into it, with just a very basic rudimentary knowledge of how all that stuff works. And my buddy Justin Lee was like immediate, like within 2 days, he was like, I can't give these back. I got to keep them. They are so good. And they're network-based lights. They don't use DMX. It all goes into the LED processor, and then he controls everything from CAMSYS, and he's got a whole, he calls it his image-based lighting
Yeah.
work table. And we did a little simple car process thing. We had driving plates. We were sitting in a Jeep, and we had like 2 panels in front of us and 2 on either side. And we could have shot like that. I mean, we didn't have someone to shake the car. We didn't have hard lights, but that would have taken us forever, not that long ago.
Yeah. It was.
And in 10 minutes, it was just looking totally believable. Easily could have shot that. I mean, we did shoot it, but and then the other stuff Kino had were, the revision of the Celeb line
Yep.
and the Diva line.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they had the large 1200 watt Celeb, and then what was the other one, 600 or 650. Those seemed really nice. And then they had the 3 sizes in the Diva line.
Yeah.
And I guess the main difference was I think they're IP rated on the Celeb, but not on the Diva.
Yeah, I think one was really meant to be kind of just live in a studio grid, whereas one was more of like a take it anywhere.
I don't know how you feel, but I've been feeling for the last couple of years that panel lights in my workflow on docks, on corporate shit, on the smaller jobs. I mean, in big job, you take 16 Vortex and you put them in a crane or ArieXs or whatever they are. But like day to day for me, the panel light is really kind of like I don't get nearly as many like in the 2 or 3 years ago, everybody wanted X amount of Arri 360. I mean, no, not 360s,
S60s, yeah,
or S30s, and that was super popular. And I haven't got a request for a panel light in months.
What's
And
replacing
my
those, like
Vortex aren't working.
matte lights, or?
I think it's we're shooting at higher ISOs. The cob lights can sort of, they're like transformers. You could put a Fresnel on them, you can put a projection, you can put various size soft boxes on them. The cob light is really going to hero for me.
Sure. You can always make a hard light soft. You can't make a soft light hard.
Exactly.
Have you messed around with the Kino Freestyles? They're like a chloroplast based.
I used them the first gen, I guess. Now they're out maybe second. Like Luke Servalda in San Francisco is a big fan of Kinos.
The Freestyle Air is the new one that's basically like a light mat.
The mat, yeah. I saw
mat.
them at the show and I was underwhelmed by their output. I like their form factor. I like the fact that you could use them with your existing ballast from the other Kino fixture. I mean, there's a lot of pluses if you were into the Kino ecosphere. But I was really underwhelmed by the output. I can't remember what they were off the top of my head.
It's about the same as the light gear, maybe marginally less.
Yeah. Like I was shocked when they came out with the new light gear Spectrums, not the 2019, but the 2024. And there was no increase in wattage. Like they weren't any brighter. And I'm like, why would you do that? Like, how is that possible that they're not, this is like, 5 years later?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need a brighter, because they're not cheap, right? I'm like, so I'm not buying any light gear Spectrums because I don't know if this happens with you, but I'm constantly fighting to get more tools on the job. And so it's really required me to analyze the stuff that's so-called value brand and figure out what stuff is really good. what stuff I can make work, or I can modify it to make it work really good.
And how many years are people going to want it before they're on to the next thing?
Yeah, I'm convinced now that, when I started, you could have a tweeny light for 15 years, and when you bought another one, you were just replacing it with the same thing that wasn't
Yeah.
quite as rusted and beat up. Now, I really feel like it's a 2 to 4 year window. Like, I'm already selling gear. Like, I bought the Nanlux 1200 daylight heads, and they were great for a year. But a year later, the bicolor came out, and I'm like, this is such a major, significant improvement. I got to sell them. And I sold my 2 daylight, and I bought 3 1200 bicolor. And if my buddies were all going, yeah, man, that's really, like, you can't be doing that. I'm like, look, I got 70 cents on the dollar. I sold, this was still the D was still a currently selling light. You could still go to Nanlux and buy it. And so I was able to sell them for like 65 to 70 cents on the dollar. It wasn't a discontinued light.
And you had already rented them however many times that they paid
Yeah,
for
I made my
themselves.
money. I lost 30% or whatever. And to me, that was well worth the upgrade, And I would say, well, I sold my Aperture 1200D because I now have the 1200 bicolor. It's roughly the same output, but you've now got your full range of, color CCT, and they immediately were sold. It's just like,
Is the output pretty similar?
What's that?
Is the output is pretty similar from the?
I would say it's pretty similar. I remember we did a test on this, but I don't remember.
Because like the Aperture 600D versus the 600X. Yeah, it's night and day difference. Like it's a huge amount more output for the daylight version than the other ones, but
it's not a stop though. It's probably like what, a 30% maybe.
I feel like it was more than that. It was like,
really?
I want to say it was close to a stop, honestly. But maybe that's
I don't
that's
remember that.
data.
You might be. I don't remember it being that. I mean, I ended up about a year and a half ago.
Now I feel like I have to go get a light meter and make sure I'm not lying to you, but
I don't remember bicolor being a stop under, say, a daylight only head. But there's no question that it's
or
less.
maybe it's the C I'm thinking of, the full color one, like the.
I sold all my daylight only heads are pretty much gone. I sold a lot of my bicolor only heads when there was an equivalent full color. So yeah, it's a little bit less output, but the amount of times that having the C saves me over the, because look, if I need more output, then it's the wrong head. I'll bump up to a 1200 bicolor head. So that didn't, I just thought it was way better to have the color control.
So would you say your biggest heads you would still try to keep daylight, and anything smaller than that you would go bicolor, or you want your biggest ones to be bicolor too?
The bigger heads are only going to be bicolor, or that it seems that's what's, neither Nanlux or Aperture announced like a really big daylight only head. They both went bicolor with their 2400s. So I think they realize what the appeal of that is.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm excited to see like when they maximize, say, the 60 amp paddle, like whatever that equates to in LED tech. That's pretty cool. Just to run. 60 amp cable around is not that much more beefy, but
it's not crazy.
To get that sort of output.
But I'm unless I change my kind of jobs I'm working on, I am rarely going to need anything more output than a 2400 bicolor light. I wish we had more output out of some of these. The frustrating thing for me right now is the projections are just so god awful relative to output. They're good in the respect to sharpness and color control and other issues. But for example, like when I tested the Spotlight Max from Aperture, and I set it to 3200, and I had a regular old ETC Source 4 with a 19 EDTL, and I put the same EDTL into their adapter mount. It was 2 stops under. It was 2 stops under a 750 LECO, which is no different than a lot of other. I'm not singling out Aperture. Other people had similar kind of performance characteristics. So it's just a drag because they can't seem to. They tried to make it beefier, and this glass is getting heavier and heavier, but it's really not giving us a ton of, You
said it's 2 stops under a 750 LECO?
Yeah, so a 750 LECO with a 19-degree EDLT, and then I took the Aperture Pro Max Spotlight with the sleeve, and I put the exact same lens into that. so the EDTL.
Okay.
And I even tried it with their own 19, just to be fair. And it was in the ballpark of a couple of stops under. Now it's a 750 versus a 600 watt, and the 600 watt obviously is full color. So I was expecting it to be less,
Yeah.
but I wasn't expecting it to be 2 stops less.
Yeah. No, that's
So
surprising. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why the only HMIs I have not sold off are my 2 Joker 800 Joe Licos, and I don't even have the other parts. They're just totally dedicated Joe Licos.
Yeah.
I have 2 of them in a hamper, and for those days where I really need the output, which is often into CRLS panels, like you could take a 5-degree barrel on one of those and hit a 50 centimeter CRLS 20 feet away and get tremendous amount out of it.
Something about that tiny emitter just is hard to replace.
Yeah, it's so efficient. It's so efficient. You know, I also have a Dado 400 HMI. Those are the 3 because that has the parallel beam adapter.
Oh, yeah.
And I just bought my first tungsten light in maybe 5 years. I decided I wanted to have a Dado 650, which are hard to find in the U.S. at a discounted price. I actually bought it from a guy in Australia, and it was like I think I paid $400 or something. But I thought with the new CRLS, what's it called, Snap Bridge, I wanted to have a really good quality color light, like a tungsten light that I could use in conjunction with that had that great spot.
That's so funny you say that. I saw one pop up on eBay recently. Man, that would be kind of just a nice light to have around. I don't. The optics are so good on those
have
things.
A set of 4 of them, you know, because you don't have to worry about power. 600's small enough. Yeah, it gets hot, but I always, I still have my Dado 150 kit. The reason I kept the Dado kit was, if you want to play in really low Kelvins, like if you want to use those dimmed down and you're at like 2000 or 2200 Kelvin, the color is so much better than almost any of these LEDs. Once you get below about 2400 or so, 25, they're getting better. Like the new apertures are starting to look really good at 2400, but the TM30, the color metrics start to fall apart as you get below 27, 2600.
Tungsten it's hard to compete with. I think the only company that comes to mind that really seems to do an incredible job with the color is Kino. I don't know if you've put a meter in front of those, but like that seems to be what they pride themselves on. They're not really going after the high output stuff. It's like they just want super good colors, controllability. Sam, the rep I usually work with there, was telling me, I forget who it was, but they basically took out all their light gear stuff and replaced it with the Kino stuff just because of I believe it was a combination of the low end dimming and just the fidelity of the colors that were thrown out. Yeah,
I mean, I guess in light gear's defense, that stuff is now old. The spectrums.
We're talking about 4 or 5 years in LED tech. It's a big deal.
Oh, NAB. We have more stuff to talk about? NAB, right?
I think we hit a lot of it. I mean, probably the only other booth I stopped by was Lightpanels with their new Astra versions they came out with, which seems like a nice little light for what it is. I think it's going to sell like hotcakes with broadcasters.
Saying, to me, I mean, they made a decision. They were well aware that people were going to say, "Shit, it doesn't have green and magenta." Mm-hmm. But Emma was saying they looked at the cost and it was going to add like $500. It was going to reduce the output, and they just felt the majority of the client base that's really going to want to move into these would rather have the less expensive price point.
I feel like the broadcast people still just eat those up like crazy. They're just lightweight. And I feel like nothing's really 100% replaced like the Astra. Like there's nothing that's really exactly
good.
like it.
I mean, I think they were really smart, because somebody was telling me, it was a minor upgrade. It's not a minor upgrade. It's IP rated and like almost twice as bright. That's pretty, yes, it doesn't have green and magenta, but, I looked at the 3 and I liked the addition of the new smaller one. Now, I don't know, again, we were talking earlier about panel lights. I tend to use those for hair and makeup, for work lights. I'm not really using, occasionally I'll use it, they're great for little bounces and stuff, because they're dirt cheap.
Yeah.
So I think they have their place. I've always, I haven't sold them. I've had them for years. I had the original ones, back in the day. Oh, inflatables. I wanted to circle back to that.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Aperture had their big one.
Yeah,
Godox had
it's
something.
impressive
There
what they
was
did. And Mitch came by the shop 2 weeks before to show me one of them, which was the 2x4. And I had a bit of a weird reaction because I felt
is
like
Mitch a New York guy?
Mitch Gross, yeah, he was with ProLight,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then when ProLight got bought by Aperture, he got sucked into the
Yep.
Aperture world. I mean, I'm friends with Dan too, but he's on the West Coast, so I just still question the inflatable stuff. Like, to me, when I saw it, I'm like, Mitch, you got to show this with regular poly
Yeah.
skirt, whatever, like your style, whatever your style is, for people that don't want the inflatable. Because my argument was, well, what is the inflatable buying you? Now, I understand it in the 20 by and maybe the 8 by, but in the smaller units like 4x4, 4x2, 4 by whatever they're gonna, all the ones they have. To me, the inflatable is when you have something that's super lightweight that you want to float out, and you need it to be inflatable to give it structure and hold shape. And then you've got this really nice lightweight LED light. But the Infinimats are not lightweight. I mean, they're IP rated. They have, they're heavier.
Yeah, they're built like a
Lightweight
tank.
core. Yeah, they are heavy light, and so it's not saving you weight really.
If you get in a gunfight, I feel like you just wear one of those on your chest and you're probably good.
Yeah, I mean,
like-
what would you, I just trying to come up with one, again, not the big ones, but the 4x4s and down. Take the 4x example. Why not just give me a regular skirt? Like, where is the advantage in the inflatable? I got to inflate it. I got to do all this stuff. It's not, I do not see one area where it's buying me. Like, what's the upside?
Yeah, I'm not quite buying it yet either. The other thing I noticed, with the big inflatable, well, maybe it makes more sense for, like, they could make a pretty flat diffusion out of it because it's like a inflated, it has some structure to it. But my first thought on using something like that would be like in a car scenario, or like and you see the reflections of the ripples of the.
We did in some of the promo stuff. I saw that.
Yeah, even in the promo stuff, it's like, well, no, I want a smooth piece of diffusion there for like a car beauty shot stuff. So I'm maybe outside on like a Condor or something, or a telehandler where you're like a quick moon box. Maybe that'd be faster, but I don't know.
I mean, to me, the most impressive one was the 20 by because it's super bright. I mean, I think they said the 800, not the 800, the 8x8. I want to say they said was 1600 watts. I might be right. It's somewhere around 1600 watts. So you have basically 4 8x make up the 20 by with the big inflatable, and it's up on a truss rig. That thing was friggin' bright. When they ramped that up at the show, I'm like, that thing is bright.
And colors and everything, and pixels.
When you look, and when you look at the cost versus the Auroras, and I've not, I've not used an Aurorus. I have a buddy that owns one. I've heard very mixed reports about its dimming capabilities and other issues. But you get 4 of those to build a 20 by, you're looking at $40,000. You're probably looking at half of that on the Aperture one.
Yeah, they didn't release a price on that yet, did they?
No, they sort of threw out some
range,
ballpark numbers. I don't need the inflatable. I don't want the inflatable. I just want, how are you going to sell? Like, they hadn't really figured out yet.
Throw it on as an option, maybe. Like, if you want the inflatable, get it. If you don't charge me for it.
To me, the inflatable should be
the mats themselves looked great.
The mats themselves look great. The ballasts are big. There's no way around that. Particularly on the 4x4. That's a pretty big.
Yeah, that was an interesting way to go. Where they have it's like one ballast that can run multiple mats at the same time. Almost like the Dado kind of idea where they used to have the central control,
Yeah, but unlike that, you're limited. I think you're limited to 25-foot extension, which is not a lot. Now, Mitch said you can get away with 50 the majority of the time. He said there'd be some minor situations, usually relative to heat. Like if it's really hot, it might throttle it. It'll still run, but it'll throttle the output back a bit.
Okay, some line loss sort of stuff.
Runs. So
interesting.
So
did you end up going to the Aperture super secret dinner deal?
No, because that was the same night as the Nanlite
dinner
party. So I didn't. And Nanlite was smart because they brought in a lot of heavy, Shane. What's his name?
Shane Hurlbut, Dean Cundy.
They They did, you know.
John Roche, I heard he was there, to put on a big show.
When I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, what were these guys thinking?
I was just going to mention at that Aperture dinner they did. It was they
Yeah.
had one of those the big Infinimats set up vertically, and
Oh, interesting. The 20 by?
it was I think it was an 8. I think it was an 8 by they had set up, but they were talking about its image-based lighting capabilities as well with the multiple pixels that they had, and did a little demo with that, which I could see being a pretty interesting scenario to use it in. But yeah, image-based lighting seemed like a hot topic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
At the
Yeah,
show
there's
too.
been a lot of, they're different approaches, I guess. We got what Kino's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
We got what Tim Kang, when he was at Quasar, now he's at Aperture. I mean, everybody's trying to figure out, and that area is just changing so rapidly. So far, I've been most impressed with what Kino's doing.
Yeah, and that's a lot more
but
finesse because it has like so many pixels.
Yeah. Because Sam and Frieder were saying, I mean, I think the roadmap was, okay, we got these Mimic, it's that image 80 size panel, but like for any car processor, anything, you need a mix of hard and soft. So I think the next things out of Kino are going to be some sort of hard light fixtures, also not DMXable, also networkable in the same way that Mimics are. But I don't know if that's part of your workflow. It might be just because my business model is a guy with a truck.
I've only done a couple few projects, but I do have a soundstage here in the Midwest as well. So that's always.
Oh, it's your soundstage. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's always in my mind as well. Like what's going to be the next thing that keeps us relevant, but. We don't have a volume wall or anything at the moment, but we do have a truss system and stuff. So people ask.
There was one other thing. Oh, Matthews. I was impressed because Matthews launched what are they calling it? The Medium Max.
The medium-sized Menace arm, basically.
Medium-sized Max Menace. So they now have the small one, the big one, and now this one, which was 12 foot. Forget what the payload at the end was. I thought he said 80 pounds. But they did some nice redesign to it with wheels, and if you have a van or a small truck, it seemed a lot more user friendly.
Yeah.
And then they had this thing that they were calling grip rail, which was kind of a 1.25 inch or 1.5 inches. You could buy either one, and they have a short one and a longer one, and it basically expands. Right, it's sort of like a telescoping, kind of like a pole caddy kind of thing where you can telescope it, lock it in. So if you want to do a wall spreader and you got some odd length, like 14 inches and 14.6 or something,
sure,
you could add that to the end, and then you could exactly. And they weren't terribly expensive. I think retail was like under $200. So I thought maybe I'd sub out some of my 4-foot pipe, put like maybe 2 of those in, just to have that flexibility.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, and that might be all I saw at the show. That was. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention. What was it? We talked about data, minor thing, but it was the Nanlux beam, the projection for the 900 and the 1200, actually having a rotating barrel, because none of these.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal to me too. I've been complaining about that since they've come out. It's just so much easier to rotate the barrel with the gobo or your.
I know.
I mean, there's you can just rotate the gobo. Well, what if you have it also cut at the same time? You have to shift your two. It's just such a pain.
And this is what I don't know why manufacturers don't do. If I was a manufacturer, I'd have 10 to 20 gaffers and DPs from different areas of the business under an NDA that I could run these ideas by, and so that because what ends up happening, is they get all this feedback of the show and realize, oh, we should have done that.
We got to change these things, which seemed like they were doing a little bit with those Infinimats. I think they were kind of putting some feelers out, and they were planning to develop some things further on them, especially with the inflatable component.
I think they really felt like NAB was going to be, let's see what kind of feedback we get. Let's see if people love these inflatables. I mean, I don't know this from any inside information, but my guess is if they got a really strong negative reaction, they might move the inflatables back to an optional accessory and push forward another option or make the kits available either way or
Yeah,
something,
sure.
something like that. Like it didn't seem like they're eminently shipping, so there's
Yeah.
there's time to regroup.
I mean, they were talking about, I think multiple people brought up the idea of like, well, if you have this 20 by rigged up with this big inflatable on it and
Yep.
it starts to lose air, then what? So they're like, well, maybe we put like almost like an idler pump that lives up there that you can maybe control remotely so you don't have to drop the lift to reinflate it or whatever.
Oh, interesting.
Which would be, a good call as long as you can tell it when to not go, during a shot or something. But
yeah, I'm wondering. It's going to be interesting to see how if they have any success with these inflatables.
Yeah, what the adaption is like.
Yeah, I mean, that Lightstar had a nice new inflatable. That was like 2,000 watts. That was really, one of those big tubular, and that was an impressive amount of light. I don't know if you saw that. It was up in their booth.
Yeah,
I think last year they announced the 1,000 watt one, and now it's like 2,000 watt. I don't personally get any calls for that kind of stuff, but
it's pretty niche.
Yeah. Yeah, and Dado had some interest. Dado, I didn't look to see if they had any. I don't think they had any new lights, but they had a new variations on the Dado E-Flect, which was interesting.
I didn't stop. I am a Dado guy. I've got a bunch of Dado stuff, but I actually didn't stop by the booth this year for some reason.
Yeah, they were trying to tell me how how much more output the PB70 was than what Godox was showing. They were a little clearly miffed by the close proximity of that industrial design to their own unit.
Yeah.
But they also did the same thing to CRLS. So there's that. But well, anything else you want to we cover?
I think that covers it. Yeah. Just nice to chat with someone who was there. You were one of the main gaffers I knew who was there. So that's cool to meet you in person. Figure we just chat a little bit about it and see if anyone listens to our ramblings, right?
You never know. I'm always amazed at what people respond to. Like when sometimes I think, oh, this is really great, and then nobody watches it. And other times I think it's completely uninteresting, and I don't know. It's tough. It's tough making content. It's tough.
Well, appreciate you taking the time today. So that was John Roche, New York City gaffer and founder of Gaffer Salon, which is a great Facebook group and community to get info on all the gaffery things that we want to know about. Appreciate him taking the time to chat about what all we saw at NAB and some of the current state of lighting in the world of cinema. Catch you on the next one.